Have you ever wondered why some dogs seem on edge, reactive to sounds, other dogs, or even everyday situations? While others move through the world with a little more ease, you are not alone, and that is exactly what we are diving into on today's episode of Tails and Tones. But before we get into that, I would love to share a little update with you. At Tails and Tones, we are on a mission to help modern pet parents simplify everyday care and elevate life with their dogs without sacrificing style or sustainability. That is why we've actually created the Tails and Tones podcast, which is a space where we share expert insights, real life stories, and thoughtful conversations that make dog parenting feel a little easier and a lot more connected. And I am so excited to share with you that we have announced that we have got our very first product coming up. It is an elevated food and water system that is designed to actually support a healthier, more comfortable meal times for our dogs. So we are working very closely with some of our listeners who have already joined our waitlist and some experts gathering real feedback and really shaping this product together so that it truly solves the challenges that dog parents face every single day. And if you would like to become part of that, bringing this feeding system to life, you can join our waitlist too. It is the easiest way to stay connected and help influence what we're building. Just head on over to our Instagram's bio, Tails and Tones, and check out in our bios link where you can see to join our pack. And we are also trying to find a name for this pack, which we've released on our Instagram in the last couple of days, which you can go check in. And that will basically give you help us shape the design. It will give you the early access, like prices, and yeah, you can get those founding pack discounts. Alrighty, let's dig in to today's episode, which I'm super excited for. Hi there, and welcome to Tails and Tones. I'm your host, Mariska, also known as Piper's mom. Now today, I am joined by Phoebe Peppiatt. She's a dog trainer who has been working here in the Middle East for over 10 years. She supported dogs and their humans through calm, positive, and judgment-free training. We're talking about confidence, communication, and the everyday moments that quietly shape how our dogs experience the world. Please give a awesome welcome to today's guest, Phoebe Peppiatt. Welcome to the podcast, Phoebe.
Thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here.
You are most welcome. So I kind of know you from our 5 a.m. walking club, but for some of our listeners here that is new to you, new to your work, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Phoebe Peppiatt. I'm a dog trainer based in Dubai. I'm originally from Essex in England, but I've been in the Middle East now for over a decade, which is shocking. Thought I'd be here for 2 years, and that's quite an often story. I have been a dog trainer for over 5 years, and my story started kind of as a baby, as a dog lover, really. My first memory is of my granddad's little Yorkshire Terrier on the record player in the living room, and I was just obsessed with dogs growing up. But I never thought that it was a career that I could pursue, or really that it was a career that existed as a child. So I was in the corporate world for quite a long time, and then I was fostering dogs and seeing more and more problems that I didn't know how to deal with and that I knew was going to make the dogs difficult to rehome. So I started to just kind of do my own self-education on how I might help the dogs, and I found just a huge passion for it, and that's where things started. Now I have many clients in Dubai and all over the world that I work with online, and my main mission is to keep dogs out of shelters by using ethical, kind training methods. And really, the term dog trainer doesn't really feel that it applies to me, but it's a label that I need to use so that people understand what I do from an outside perspective, and I'm searchable. But it's much more of a coaching role. Sometimes I'm a therapist to the dog. A lot of the times I'm a therapist to the human, and it's bridging that gap between, what a person and a human wants out of their dog, and really what the dog's feeling like and how they can live harmoniously together.
Love that, because sometimes that is something when we think about a trainer, it is very much this militant view that people get in, like this canine, we're going to train these dogs, and you need to be like very like brutal with certain things, and I feel that might work for some dogs that need that structure and stuff. But in my opinion, I'm like, it needs to be fun. The dogs need to also enjoy themselves. But there's certain things that, we obviously need them to be able to do. And when it comes to rescue dogs, and like I just spent this morning actually at Canine Friends and seeing some of the dogs, and, like it breaks my heart to know that some of those dogs are there for like 6 years. And then I'm like, that's older than Piper, and she's had a very luxurious life. You fostered quite a lot of dogs as well. Like, how has some of those like learning curves, like when you were fostering them, what has that actually taught you that you feel, you haven't learned that in a qualification or a course? Like that was kind of taught on the job.
Yes, that's a very good question, because having your hands on the dog and living with a dog for a temporary or prolonged period of time really gives you a bit more insight into where these behaviours are coming from and how best to understand them and deal with them. So one thing that I hugely learned, which I never could learn on a course, was patience, because you really do start to understand the more you learn about dog training that dogs aren't misbehaving, if that's the label that we put on them, intentionally. They're really trying to communicate some kind of struggle or suffering. And I've kind of been through the entire process from someone that knows nothing to now where I am. So I empathise with each of those stages. And when I was first fostering dogs that were, dragging me down the street, for example, not listening to absolutely anything I say outside, I was thinking, what's wrong with this dog? Why won't they just enjoy a nice walk with me? I want to go out and have fun. But actually, as I started to learn, they're just in total chaos and stress at that time. They can't hear anything. And to go back to your point about the old school kind of aversive trainers, we call them, the more research has been done and the more that science has caught up with dog training, we understand that stress blocks learning, the same as it does for us as humans. So if we add stress to that situation, you may find that a dog will begin to comply with you. So that example of a dog on a walk, they might start to listen to you if you're yanking a slip lead or a choke chain, but they're not really learning anything in order to build their confidence. So I think that's what I learned myself that I couldn't learn from, course A or course B, is being hands-on with the dog. And the first experience I had as dog training as an education was actually in a facility in the US, which I didn't know at the time was a balanced dog training facility. Now that kind of means we sometimes use treats, but we mostly use force and pain, fear, intimidation. Now, the people that ran this place had no idea, I don't think, that they were really doing things the wrong way. But it took a week or so of me kind of learning the ropes to think, there's got to be a better way than this, this can't be the best way to help the dogs. And so that led me down a different path and to the ethical, positive side of training. Now, you did also mention using force, and maybe that's right with some dogs. I don't think we can entirely say that force-free is possible. For example, if you're in the park with Piper, and Piper really doesn't want to go home, but you have a meeting, there's only so much that you can, Piper, let's go, before you've got to either give a gentle tug on the lead, or sometimes dogs really plant themselves, particularly golden retrievers will just lay on their back and say, I'm not moving. And then sometimes you've got to give them a bit of a shuffle to get up and, gently encourage them to move. So whilst we
Do a
can't be
kettlebell carry, just pick them up and carry
exactly.
them.
They're like, I won't be moved. I'm not leaving, like from the Wolf of Wall Street. and so I don't think we can say that we can be forever force-free, but it definitely taught me working with these dogs and having them in my home just to have more empathy and patience for them. And so courses and education and everything accessorizes or complements that, I should say, but doesn't replace the lived experience of being with these dogs.
And I also think it is that experience that kind of gives us as humans also more confidence in how do we deal with these dogs. And something that is very common here in the UAE, and I know some other places as well, but especially here, is reactivity. And it comes up in a lot of conversations with many dog parents. Like when you meet a reactive dog, like for the first time, what are you usually paying attention to beneath that like behavior?
Yeah, great question again. So you're right, it's a very common problem here in the UAE and further afield, but particularly I find in Dubai, it's a recurring request that I get a lot is, can you help with my reactive dog? So when I first go into a home or I meet a dog outside, if a dog is hugely reactive to somebody coming in, then we actually meet outside on the street first versus in the home. But what I'm looking for beneath the surface of the barking, the lunging or the growling, or a combination of all of those things, is the other more subtle body language signals that maybe people who haven't studied this wouldn't pick up on. And what might be triggering that reaction. There's always a cause for the reactivity, and whilst it's often mislabeled as aggression or dominance, it's actually normally a fearful response or a confidence lacking response. So I'm looking at the environment, how they're being handled by their person, what the sights and sounds and smells are around that could actually be kind of ramping them up to believe that that reaction is where they need to be in order to create space for themselves.
That's very interesting. I mean, there is so many things that can contribute to that. And I think it is so important for people to also realize, and I'm glad you mentioned the smells, because what we smell and what the dogs smell, like they can sniff stuff out. I mean, I'm some days amazed at Piper's like sniffing abilities. If you are using very perfumey things in the house, that can actually influence them as well. So what would you kind of then advise them, if things like that is occurring in the house?
Well, it's a good point. And I was just thinking, I'm always thinking I'm the fun police when it comes to dogs and homes, because I'll often go in and say, this fragrance that you're using isn't ideal for the dog, or these sounds need to be minimized, or we need to create a more calming environment. But it is a serious thing. And so I do look at those factors and advise that either fragrances are taken away or sounds and sights are changed. Because, I mean, in the home, if you imagine, we can only hear really what's going on within the walls, unless there's a particularly noisy neighbour and that happens, or maybe a car goes past outside. Dogs can hear for a lot further than we can. They can smell a lot more than we can. So even in the home, what we might think is a low stimulating environment might already be raising their stress levels. Then once they go out, straight out the gate into the outside world, we predominantly think and perceive the world with our eyes, but their noses are picking up everything. So it's like us having just images of things flying past our eyes. It's how I imagine it. I haven't been able to ask my own dog to verbalise that, but that's how overwhelming I imagine that must feel. Wow. And so it's completely natural for them to be totally distracted. And then for one thing, like another dog approaching them or a child, to just tip them over the edge. So yeah, I definitely, when I first go to a client's home, look around and say, we need to modify this or this in order to create the most low stimulation and calming environment for the dog.
And then kind of what would be the step? So obviously doing that, but is there then, the next step we do this or the next step, or is it just so different for each dog? It's really hard to pinpoint.
In terms of reactivity?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of reactivity, it really depends on what we perceive the trigger to be, but 9 times out of 10 stems from, as I mentioned earlier, a lack of confidence. So that's where we start generally. We try to minimize the exposure to those stimulus or triggers that are causing the reaction, whilst we work on building the confidence simultaneously, because that builds resilience whilst we then work on changing the emotional response. So we counter condition negative responses to positive emotional responses. And as we do that, we build the confidence of the dog. And that can take, many different steps. Sometimes it's working on basic skills, not as an obedience necessarily task, but more to build that confidence, the communication between you and your dog, and also the trust and bond, because that's often where if we start with that and we strengthen that bond, it makes a huge difference to reactivity, even in the first instance. Because if you go outside and you're not having a tug of war, or you're not getting frustrated with your dog because they're kicking off at everything that they see outside, and it's more like best friends going out together and, I've got your back, I'm going to give you space where you need it. If we can strengthen that bond so that the trust is there, then we're already taking a huge leap.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that sounds great. And so, like, things like, obviously the doorbell's ringing and dogs are just like, "Whirr." Even Piper, she barks and she can't even bark, but that is the funniest thing. So I feel sometimes we laugh at it because, it is so adorable when she does that. But is there anything we can, like, I don't think she's not confident, but, in a way, I've always just like let it go because if the doorbell rings, she kind of barks and I feel she is protecting the house, but it's not like it is something that happens every 5 minutes. So like, it's very like often like where do we kind of have that balance of do we address it? Do we like have her say and protect her house?
That's a great question. And the way that I like to look at reactivity is an overreaction. So if your dog is excited when the doorbell goes, they give you a little ruff ruff, or they come and find you, or they want to let you know that somebody's there, but they're not necessarily protecting the house as though they believe someone's coming in to murder the family, then I think it's something that's okay as long as you're okay with it. We certainly don't want to silence dogs and take away their voices entirely. If you find and you learn a little bit about their body language, or it's just already screamingly obvious that your dog is suffering and struggling every time the doorbell's ringing or there's somebody outside, and it's causing them to react so much that they're difficult to come back from, it's hard for you to calm them down, or they seem that they're just really stressed and going around in circles in the home, then it's something that I think should be addressed with training. And if it's not a confidence issue, if it's more an excitement issue, then it's more about teaching your dog what they should do instead. So we're so used to saying to dogs, no, no, no. And we sometimes forget what to tell them to do instead. And I often use the analogy, it would be like if you got a new job and you started your first day in the office, nobody trained you on what you should be doing, where you should be sitting, how to open your emails, but they just said, no, 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 every time you did the wrong thing. So you'd be trying to guess and you'd probably not like working there very much. So I think it's the same thing for our dogs. We have to give them an alternative. And for many dogs, it helps to have, their own place or a station that's not too far away from the door, that we teach them when you hear that doorbell or a knock, you go there, you wait there in a safe little, platform to see what's going on. And when I come back in, or I've let the person, let the delivery in, then I'll either give you a treat and let you down or praise you. And then we kind of move on with our day. And that works for a lot of dogs because they know what they should be doing and where they need to be.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. And I mean, that kind of brings us to like the socialization of dogs as well, I feel, because, some dogs just like, I mean, Piper is very well socialized because from a very early age, as soon as we got her, we did all of these little things. But I mean, even earlier when they're very much puppies, I feel that is something we need to look at. And like when we look at a place like the UAE, what type of impacts does early socialization kind of have on the dogs? And is there anything that people can actually do, even if they get a dog today?
So this is such a critical part of confidence building in a dog, and it's very often missed, particularly in the UAE. Ideally, in the first few weeks of life, a puppy should be shown all kinds of different environments, sights, sounds, smells, textures, affection from humans. They are like a sponge for new experiences during those first few weeks, and we call it the crucial puppy socialization period. Now, if you're not sure of the background or the breeding of the dog, which happens often in the UAE because many dogs are rescues, then we're often not sure if they've missed that or if they've had it. So if you have a dog and you bring home a puppy today, I would say the number one thing you can do is take them outside and let them start to experience the world. Now, probably alarm bells are going off in your ears if you're listening to this as well, because you're told, don't take them out until they've had their vaccinations. So I'm not suggesting that we let them down, sniffing other dogs and exposing them to germs. But even if, and most puppies, you can hold them in your arms. If you take them out just for a few minutes at a time, just in firstly low level stimulation areas, and then kind of building up the ranks to different environments, that builds so much confidence and resilience in a dog as they become an adult dog. The same thing with textures that you can do at home is introduce them to different things. And it's very important that they have positive human interaction within those first few weeks. So if a dog has been in a shop window or in a glass box in a pet shop and they're having little to no human interaction, of which is not entirely positive, if it's always just, food shoved in and things like that, that can actually set a dog up to be fearful throughout their adolescence and their adult life, which is a shame. We often imagine and assume that dogs have been abused if they're fearful of human touch or just not sure about people or very scared outside, whereas normally it is that they've missed that kind of crucial puppy socialization phase. So if you're lucky enough to have a puppy or a young dog and you've brought them home, this is the best thing that you can do for them for now.
For us, the stroller was amazing. Piper was a little bit beyond her vaccination when we got her, but still that helped us, especially through surgeries and things. She still could feel like, she's socializing, even though she didn't have to go out and, be in awkward situations. There's a lot of pressure on pet parents. We always want to try and do right by our dogs, and sometimes we feel discouraged. What do you wish, these pet parents could actually understand about their dogs' inner world?
I think the number one thing goes back to kind of compassion and empathy, is just imagining in your dog's inner world how they must be feeling in the human world. And of course, it has a toll on us as humans as well. So that shouldn't be undermined. But if we just try and put ourselves in the mind of the dog and in their inner world, they are expected to live in our human world with often little to no training or explanation about how any of this works, or this, crazy but beautiful and amazing city that we live in. We're in a bit of a concrete jungle, that they're not in nature as often as they maybe would be in other places. And so to try and understand how the dog perceives the world from their eyes, I think is the number one thing that I would ask pet parents to try and do. Now, I do understand how much pressure people are under with their pets. And I understand how much information comes at you from different sides now, especially with social media. It'll be like 5 things you should do. And then the next day you'll see 5 things you shouldn't do. And it's the same things. So there's too much information around. And I think if you, at the very base level, before even you're able to start training, if you can just try to dial it back and go back, as I said, to that bond that you have, that you're building, and that trust that you have with your dog. And if you're going out 5 nights a week and every night the walk is chaos and you're both coming back stressed, then try 2 nights out of that 5 to just go somewhere like a park, find a bench, just sit there and try to just absorb the world without the pressure of walking closely next to me without pulling me on the lead, or not barking at other dogs. Or if you need to drive somewhere where it's unlikely that you're going to come across other dogs during that walk, or go out slightly earlier or later, just try and take the pressure off a little bit from always having to, fix the situation in the moment.
It really builds also on that, what you've mentioned earlier, the dog's confidence. It's really this bond that is shaping. But for you, what are some of those signs that you kind of pick up on, when a dog is actually starting to gain confidence?
One of the small, quieter signs would actually be that your dog is resting more throughout the day. You'll often find that dogs who are not confident, who are reacting a lot to the door or outside, or are just difficult to settle, as they start to build that confidence, they'll just be sleeping more, which is a happy, confident dog is a dog that's sleeping 18 hours a day, even as an adult. And then if we can define confidence as your dog's ability to cope with novelty. So let's say you start to come in and notice that your dog that previously used to react to anything you came in with, just let you come into the kitchen with a carrier bag they've never seen and nothing happened. Or, big boxes, delivery boxes and things. It's those quiet things that might not scream, okay, we've solved everything. But over time, you're going to start to see that the things they used to react to, they're just taking in their stride. And then the other larger parts are normally very obvious. As a dog starts to gain confidence and you start to have more connection when you're outside, you call their name, which they know very well because they respond to every time you call it in the house. They start to actually look up at you when you call that name in the park. Whereas previously it was like, I don't know who you are, I don't know where I am. And those kind of things are really beautiful to watch, because it's not that the dog was being disobedient before, but they were just flooded with stress and, excitement and overwhelm, that they now are in a position to say okay, Mum, yeah, what do you need? What do you want?
Yeah. The thing that pops up a lot in questions are about separation anxiety. And it is something that is quite stressful to deal with, especially for people that might not be home all the time. If you're living in an apartment, so where do you usually start with a client that is facing this type of separation anxiety?
Yeah, so this is a huge one. It's very common here in the UAE, especially with apartment living, because you've got the added stress on top of, as you mentioned, the empathy for the dog and the emotion at leaving them, but also, and causing them distress, but also of neighbours who might be complaining, might be causing you problems with the building. So it's a very high pressure situation, and often it kind of takes people by surprise because they'll bring home a rescue dog who may have been in a shelter for 6 years, as you mentioned earlier. There are examples of that. And so they're used to being, apart from humans, you'd think, but then they have this issue and they're just barking non-stop. So where I normally start, and this isn't the ideal answer that everyone wants to hear, but to be honest, it's the honest truth, is we want to dial back the amount of time they're being left alone, if at all possible, to almost zero, while we begin to work on the separation anxiety. Now, whether that means that somebody's coming over to the house if you need to be in the office every day so that they can sit with the dog, or whether you're able to do a couple of weeks work from home while you work on this. Because if you're dealing with true separation anxiety, your dog is really going into kind of panic attack status when you leave. And so a popular misconception is, okay, we can just leave the dog and then they'll figure it out. And if you've got a dog that has just, a little bit of whimpering when you leave, and then you may watch on a camera that they'll wander around looking a bit lost and then go to sleep, that's not the kind of separation anxiety that we're talking about. But when your dog is becoming destructive, chewing things, non-stop barking, and it doesn't lower, we really want to build trust in them that you're not going to abandon them. And as we're doing that and we're able to spend more time at home with them, we can then start to build up the absences and desensitize the whole process, so that what's very unnatural for a dog, which is to be left entirely alone, becomes acceptable and something that they can cope with, and they know, okay, mum's gone out or dad's gone out, but they're coming back.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of what we did with Piper as well. So we kind of built it up like 5 minutes, then I went back in and she was crying, and I was sitting in our lobby and I was just like, oh my gosh, she's crying, no. And then like kind of build, and like now we can honestly leave her for hours and she wouldn't even like cry. But what's funny about this is when I leave the house and my husband is here working from home, she would most of the time go and lie on the sofa, so she's got a direct view of the door, and she will not go into his office.
Oh, well, I don't want to say that signifies favoritism.
Maybe.
It's amazing that you've managed to work on it and that you have a success story for her being, able to tolerate being home alone. But, it's just quite sweet. If she's happy to go and lay on the sofa and she's not, panicking or barking nonstop, but she's just keeping one eye on the door for when you come back, then I think that's just what we call love, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mariska.
Yeah, definitely. There's honestly just like so many things with dogs that we've learned about. And I mean, it's really kind of this almost like balance. You need to balance a lot of stuff. There is some days where I'm just like, Piper is doing this, I don't know how to address this. And we use those talking buttons for her. And so I honestly think she can use it and she knows exactly what she's saying. My husband's got a different story because she runs to it and then she hits the ball button. She just wants the ball all the time. And she doesn't stop. So it's like some days we have to like pick it up, and then, we have the all done one, and then she'll be like, now and later, and then she just press everything. So like, it is a bit of a challenge to kind of get that, but she's very ball obsessed. So like if we take the ball away, she'll run to the buttons and just keep on smacking it until someone actually comes. And it is.
And she's going directly for the button that says
the ball. Yeah. And then
then I think that's unarguably showing that she understands that at least that button, whether she understands that sound, I mean, dogs do understand words. That's how they know the difference between sit and lie down or whatever else. They understand our human language, but it could be the positioning of the button. But for sure, she has made that connection between I'm going to push that and then the ball's going to appear. So yeah, I don't think you can argue with that.
But yeah, it is sometimes hard getting her to like stop and like say, okay, we need to take a break now. You can't play with your ball longer than 5 minutes, because then she's like very stiff in her neck. And yeah, so trying to like navigate that. So I always try, and I don't want to do it with like treats all the time, because then I don't want her to form this habit of like, ooh, if I want treats, I just like do this, and then treats, come. Or she'll actually ask for treats, because one of the treat like buttons is a treat. So then I know, okay, she wants treats now.
Wow,
but
I want a button on my desk that says treats. If someone could just deliver chocolate, that'd be
I'll bring you a button. But yeah, so obviously, they are amazing. They are like little sponges, but it is sometimes a bit frustrating if you are dealing with something like that, because mid-call she'll be like bull, 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 bull.
Yeah,
and then I'm like, okay.
So if I can ask, what do you do if you're not providing treats when you take the buttons away? Are you sometimes just cold turkey, the buttons are gone and the ball is gone, and will she then go and settle? Or will she then bother you?
Barking.
Or do you...
Yeah, then she goes into the barking. So then we have to kind of, because she wants the ball, and then she'll hide the ball in different places which she can't get to, and then she'll start barking, because this is now two-man like sport. It's not like Piper playing ball on her own. So yeah, so then I'll like kind of tie the ball up onto a rope if I'm on a call, and then kind of play with her. But yeah, she loves hiding the ball in the bathroom, and then she can't find it, so then she barks. And that's the only thing that she does that's I'm like, oh, it's a little bit naughty. So we try to manage it, but I try to give her certain times, but then she'll be like, bull, 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 bull.
She sounds like a character. I mean, I've met her a couple of times, but we were walking, and I love the tenacity that she shows, and also just the resilience and the repeated requests. But I would say, if you need to provide something else to take her mind off of it, but you don't want to be a constant treat dispenser, because she may well make that chain of, okay, I play with the ball, then treats come, great. I would maybe feed the need in another way, with like a long-lasting chew, or something that she can use as an appropriate outlet for her energy that isn't the ball and doesn't require your attention. Because something that seems like she's also doing is taking her toy somewhere that she knows that she can't get to it because she wants your attention. So then she's barking like, excuse me, I need your help, but because maybe she's feeling that she just needs a little bit of participation. But of course you do have things that you need to be doing in the day. So I would try to, maybe mix in some other enrichment games that are very low level stimulation, like even, putting a couple of her treats, so it's not too many, inside of like a toilet roll and fold it over, or a tea towel or something, so that she's got to work on that, but it will bring her excitement down, because for her the ball is very stimulating, so that sends her into like a 10 out of 10 excitement. We want to bring her energy down a little bit so that she can then kind of self-soothe.
That's true. Yeah, we'll definitely work into that, because obviously heavy chews and things for her is a little bit more impossible, because with her cleft palate, so we can't just like always give her all of these things. But we've been giving those like little treat dispensers that she can like play with, but then again I'm like, I don't want her to always connect the two, because then she just kind of gets clever and then wants treats and then do that.
For her, maybe yes, if having like a hard long lasting chew is difficult for her, maybe if there's something soft that she's okay with eating, it doesn't upset her tummy, like cheese, you could just do some tiny cubes of cheese and just roll them in a tea towel or something. Okay. So she's not having to use her teeth too much. She's using her nose a little bit and just kind of figuring something out just to bring that excitement down.
There's so many things that we as pet parents can also kind of, do. And how do you kind of help those people when they need to balance compassion for their dog with the realities of like their neighbors? So like if the dog constantly barks, like, we kind of talked about that, but like how do you balance that?
So I generally put in a management and prevention plan at the same time that we start a training plan, because we can't expect a dog to just overnight understand how to behave or how to stop doing something. So for the door example, for some dogs, it's enough to have a visual barrier. So some dogs don't have much of a reaction to the doorbell, but they do get really overexcited if somebody is coming in. So it could be that we just use a baby gate, or if they're comfortable with being in another room while we bring somebody in, that is a good management technique that stops the dog running over and jumping up. Or if it really is the doorbell that's setting off the dog, then I would advise that for a temporary measure, we're going to put a little sticky note over the doorbell that says, for any delivery drivers or guests coming over, please don't use the doorbell. If even knocking is too much for the dog, then I would put your phone number on there. So we need to get creative at the beginning, because yes, we have compassion and empathy for the dogs and why they're exhibiting this behaviour, but we do also need to have respect for our neighbours. So we've got to try and minimise the reaction that they're having that can be heard by others, whilst we work on, their emotional response to it.
And I also did an episode back way, I think it's episode 8 or something. I'll link it in the show notes. Also, how to communicate with your neighbors as like humans, because when you're going through something like that, it is so important. If they've raised a complaint, kind of show them, listen, I am working on this. I am addressing this. Give them updates, maybe give them even a fruit basket, whatever it is, to kind of soften the mood. There's so many ways that you can do that.
That's a huge one, actually. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, because often when I'm working with dogs who are reacting inside the home, and, a lot of them will tell me, my neighbour's already been complaining this side or this side. And I always suggest that they put a note under their door if they don't want to, go and knock and say hello in person, but that just says, we're working on it, even that we're working with a trainer, and actually on Wednesdays between 9 and 10 a.m. you might hear a bit more barking than usual, but it's actually because we're working on the issue. And then to soften the blow by, maybe giving a fruit basket or some cookies or something. So I think often our reaction, especially when we're already really stressed with the situation in the home, is to think, why don't you understand, to our neighbours? But of course they don't. And even that small bit of kindness from us can buy so much understanding and tolerance from them whilst you're then in the training process. So it's a big win if you're able to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, there is so many miscommunications between humans and our dogs. From your experience, where do these misunderstandings kind of tend to show up the most?
Well, this is a good one. So one thing that happens a lot when I'm brought in to help with potty training is that people will tell me my dog is doing it to be spiteful, or they're doing it as a dirty protest of some sort, because what they'll say is they'll wait and, they won't go. They just won't go when we go on a walk. They won't pee, they won't poo. We come home and then as soon as I'm not looking, they'll disappear off and they'll leave me a present on top of the stairs or something. That's a huge misconception, because often what's actually happening is that when accidents have happened in the wrong place, which is usually in the house, then the pet parents have told the dog off and scolded them, sometimes even following old school advice of, showing the dog, putting their nose in it or something. And then what you've actually taught the dog is not to go in front of you, because you've scared the dog into thinking, I better not go in front of mum or dad because I'm going to get in trouble. So when I need to go and hide somewhere. So they're not going on the walk because they're scared of being told off. They can't at the beginning differentiate between this is the right place and wrong place because they don't know. So dogs are not being spiteful if they're running away, hiding, or refusing to go in front of you. But with that in mind, or any behaviour, try to think, why is this happening? Because dogs may have a little bit of sass, and sometimes, I have a client at the moment who I saw actually today, and we've been working on reactivity, but what one of the small dogs has decided to do now is sit down multiple times on a walk, not out of fear, but because sitting equals treats. So now we're having to just sitting, staring, and like looking at the treat pouch, like, you need to pay me before I walk. And so we're having to work on that, and that is a little bit of sass. But a popular misconception is that a dog is behaving a certain way out of spite or to annoy you or upset you, when really there's normally just a complete miscommunication and misunderstanding that needs kind of bridging with communication.
I love that.
And I come across.
And when we start learning that kind of language, what do you think, or who do you think is changing first, like the dog or the human?
Always the human, always the human. And it's true of learning, anything about understanding the dogs better. So when they start to understand body language, for example, people will often think my dog just lunges out of nowhere or will just start barking out of nowhere at something while we're outside. But actually there's so many signals that they're using all of the time that we don't speak their language until we learn it, right? So we're asking them to learn our human language, learn words and learn behaviours that we want them to perform. So it's our duty to learn their behaviour as well, because everything from just a slight side eye to a stiffening of the body to a position of the paw to where their ears are they back, are they scared, are they forward, are they potentially angry or thinking about lunging, is their mouth open and relaxed or has it closed, which is a tense mouth. All of these things take a little bit of time to learn and then to spot in the moment, but once you see those, it's always the human that changes, because they think, actually this didn't happen without warning. I was given all of these warning signs before, but I just didn't speak the language.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And I mean, we spend so much time training our dogs when we go walking. We give them all these, commands, but not always like the quieter moments, I feel. How important are routines like, the feeding, the resting, and the transitions for a dog's like emotional regulation?
Absolutely huge. It's crucial when we start training or considering any behavior of a dog that we think about their environment and their setup and their routine. For example, I can give you my own personal example. When we first brought Betsy home, there was no children in the house, and now we have a very spirited toddler, I would say, who is causing chaos in the house. And it's changed Betsy's routine entirely, because we would previously go for a walk in the morning, do a bit of enrichment or a bit of training practice, have breakfast, and then she would sleep for hours. Now I have to be very intentional about the space I create for Betsy to be able to go and have that rest. If she's left downstairs where my daughter's running around throwing toys, screaming, the TV is on, all sorts of things, not too much screen time, but we do sometimes, all of these sorts of things, then Betsy just cannot relax. And she was a reactive dog when we first brought her home. So again, when she goes out for her evening walk, she's already been stressed all day by the environment. Her routine's completely off. She's overstimulated. And so she's a lot more irritable. The same as if we have a stressful day at work and we come home, things that may not bother us normally, like, someone we live with leaving washing up in the sink, can suddenly become something that makes us just think, So routine is huge. The setup is huge in terms of where their resting area is. So even in a quieter home, you don't really want to put a dog's bed or their daytime nap bed too close to the kitchen where people will be coming in and out and there's lots of sounds. You want to create that calm space. And then in terms of feeding environment is also very important for confident dogs as well as nervous dogs, but particularly for nervous dogs, you want to make sure that their feeding area is not an area that people are constantly walking past, that they have, a safe zone to go and eat in where people aren't going to be bothering them. And even things like the setup of the feeding area. So Betsy, for example, my own dog, is scared of reflective surfaces. And it took a little bit of time for me to figure this out when I first brought her home, but she wouldn't drink or eat from a stainless steel or anything that was reflective bowl because it was scaring her. So now I know that, and I've adapted the type of bowl that she eats from. And she also needs something heavy based and that has a non-stick surface underneath, because if it just moves slightly and she gets skitterish, she'll run away. And I've seen this with other client dogs a lot of the time. People will say, my dog has stopped eating, they've gone off their food. But actually it could be something as simple as their feeding setup, station or environment has become uncomfortable for them, and so they're avoiding that versus what's actually in their bowl.
Oh, that's amazing that you kind of mentioned that, because I feel, the feeding setup can be such a game changer for them because, dogs obviously, and especially here where it's so hot, they need to drink a lot of water. And if you're feeding your dog certain foods, that obviously is going to make that they do want to eat more or drink more water. And if that is something that's going to scare them, then maybe not going to have as much. And like kind of the height and things, do you think like the setup, like the height of the bowls, does that play a role into their stability and like the environment and influence their posture and stress levels or behavior? Do you think that all kind of interlinks as well?
Absolutely, I do, and I can't speak to specifics because I'm not a vet or a canine physiotherapist, but I definitely have observed and learned over working with dogs of all different sizes that a different height setup is definitely appropriate for different breeds. Now, the old school kind of stance on this, the old school trainers would tell you that dogs are supposed to eat from the floor, so everything needs to be down on the ground level. But actually, I mean, if you look at the amount of different shapes, sizes, and different breeds that we have created as humans, they don't all look like the wolf that was thousands of years ago self-domesticating in campsites. This is just a very different type of landscape and dog that we're looking at. So I think it's crucial to look at your specific dog and what their needs are, so that we can meet their needs and make them as comfortable as we possibly can. Because for some dogs, leaning over really isn't comfortable, and so something that's slightly elevated that doesn't put as much pressure on their joints or on their center of gravity is huge.
I mean, another issue a lot of people are having is, we've kind of talked about it, but the potty training. And it is one of the first places I feel people feel that they can be overwhelmed, whether they've just brought in a puppy or they've actually got a dog that is older and, kind of just pee everywhere. What would your biggest advice be for that?
Okay, so this does happen consistently across all ages, actually. It's not just a puppy issue. I'm often called for dogs that are 2 years old that have just never quite managed to get it, or older dogs. The first thing I would say, if you have a dog that has previously been potty trained for a long period of time and all of a sudden then they start to have accidents, the first thing I would take them to would probably be a vet versus a trainer, because it could be that they have a UTI or something else that's causing them to have those accidents versus them just not knowing where the right place is or how to signal. But for a dog that is learning the ropes of potty training, I know that can be one of the most frustrating times that you can have with a new dog. And it hits you straight away because you bring that puppy home, and it's like, it seems like it's every 20 minutes that they're peeing or pooping somewhere. So I would say the biggest thing that you can have is patience. And it's going to wear thin at sometimes. There will be times at 10 p.m. before you're trying to go to bed, where you're in the garden or in your outside space thinking they're never going to go. And I know that when I bring them in, they're going to do it immediately in my bed or somewhere close by. But the consistency and patience here is absolutely crucial, because there's really no magic wand or magic potion for this. It's just scientific fact that the more often they go in the right place, the more likely they are to use that again. So I often use the analogy of like a football match. If you put your designated potty area in the garden or on your balcony or just outside of your building, that every time your dog goes there is a goal for the right team. Every time they have an accident somewhere else, it's just a goal for the other team, and we need to win overall.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to make people see it as. Don't worry if they've scored a goal, we are going to win. And it's just about taking them to that space consistently and waiting it out, because it takes 5 to 10 minutes for a puppy's brain to relax enough that they actually think, oh, I need to pee or poo. Or if you're asking them to do it outside is so exciting for them that all of that sensory input, like we were talking about earlier with smells and sights and sounds, all of that hits them first before they start thinking like, oh, do I need to go to the toilet? And then reward when they're going in the right place. So again, I use another analogy of, if you imagine a household with 5 bathrooms, someone comes in and puts a golden toilet in one of the rooms and they say, I'm going to give you 50 dirhams every time you use this bathroom. Well, you might really like going in the other places, but you're going to choose that one.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So while we teach them that and then add a cue to it, that's the most important thing. But it's very frustrating. I hugely empathize with anyone going through it. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just about how consistent you can be in these early days.
And that is some great advice as well for very overwhelmed pet parents as well. I feel, just keep at it. There is some light at that tunnel. And Phoebe, where can people actually find you?
Well, you can find me on any socials, on Instagram, TikTok, and the rest at Double Woof Dog Training, or on my website, which is double-woof.com.
Thank you so much. And before we ended, I wanted to check, is there anything you felt we've missed out? Anything else you want to cover still?
You know, there's just one thing that kind of came as a thought throughout our conversation that I haven't mentioned and I want to, because we've mentioned that pet parents can often feel so much pressure. There's pressure coming from all sides externally of how you should be training your dog and how you can help them live their best life. And all of these things are valid. But what's also valid is that you need to make sure you're still taking care of yourself. Now, we can become so obsessed with what the right food is, etc., the right sleeping station for the dog, which is absolutely a positive thing to be focusing on. But we often then forget to think about ourselves, and it's very true that you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're having incredibly stressful walks with your dog and you're trying 3-4 times a day or even 2 times a day to take them out, you're not a bad dog mum or dad if you just need to go out for a walk on your own in the morning. Just, take them out first, have that, moment of chaos, come back, have a deep breath and take yourself for a walk for 5 minutes, because that is going to make you come back and show up as such a better pet parent and just individual. So I think that's one thing I just want everyone to know, is that you're doing your best. Your dog appreciates it. They're very forgiving. They will still love you. So if you need to take time for yourself, please do. And if that means that your dog has been tied to you all morning for potty training and you just need to go upstairs and have a shower and they have an accident in the living room, it's not the end of the world. Make sure you're okay first.
Oh, that's some great advice. Thank you so much for being such an amazing guest. And we will also link all your socials and everything on the show notes, so you can find it there.
Thank you so much, Mariska. I've had a very enjoyable conversation with you.
Phoebe, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your heart with us today. So this conversation was such a powerful reminder that progress doesn't come from perfection. It comes from that understanding, consistency, and care. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Tales and Tones. And if today's episode spoke to you, I'd be so grateful if you actually leave us a review on podchaser.com or share this with a fellow pet parent who might need to hear this conversation too. If you've got any questions or you just want to come say hi, I'm always around on Instagram at Tales and Tones, where every tale tells a story and every tone speaks from the heart. See you in the next one.